Picture this. 50,000 years ago, a cold wind sweeps across Ice Age. Europe, a shadow moves behind the trees, muscular, thick-browed, human, but not quite. You've just locked eyes with a Neanderthal, and he's watching you back. They weren't monsters, though we once painted them that way. For generations, they were misunderstood as primitive, hunched, dim-witted cave brutes. But science now tells a different story, one of survival, culture, and unexpected kinship. Neanderthals weren't a failed evolutionary experiment. They were a successful, adaptable species that thrived for over 300,000 years. They lived through ice ages, hunted mammoths, and cared for their wounded and elderly. The question isn't just where did they go? The real question is, how could such a strong, intelligent, resilient species vanish? Or did they ever truly vanish at all? Their fossils speak volumes, bones found from Spain to Siberia, buried in caves, preserved in soil, chipped and worn by time. They left behind stone, tools, hearths, ornaments, and mysteries too deep for bone. The first Neanderthal skull was discovered in 1856 in Germany's Neander Valley. It launched a debate that raged for over a century. Were they us? Were they beasts? Or something in between? For decades, we saw them as the evolutionary losers. They died out, we survived. End of story, or so we thought. But with each fossil uncovered, the line between them and us grew thinner. Then came the revolution, genetics. In 2010, scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome for the first time. What they found shook anthropology to its core. Modern humans carry Neanderthal 40,000 years ago, and their presence fades from the record. Their tools disappear, their hearths go cold, their last stronghold, southern Spain, Gibraltar, falls silent. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens expand across Europe like wildfire. Two species, alike and different, shared the same continent. We met them in valleys, across tundras, inside caves. And when we did, we didn't just compete, we connected. We made love, swapped genes, maybe shared stories around shared fires. But while we spread, they shrank slowly, steadily, and mysteriously. Why did we thrive while they dwindled? Climate may have been a killer. Temperatures swung wildly, ecosystems shifted, food sources vanished. A few bad winters could wipe out a small, isolated population, but Neanderthals had survived harsh climates before. They'd hunted in snowfields and slept under ice-covered skies. This time, though, they weren't alone in the cold. Enter Homo sapiens, toolmakers, artists, traders, storytellers. We brought bows and sewing needles, symbolic art and complex language. We weren't just surviving, we were organizing, innovating, and outpacing. Maybe we had larger social networks or better communication. Maybe we could adapt faster to new challenges and new environments. Or maybe we just had more babies and more backup in hard times. Some scientists argue it was brainpower or creativity that gave us the edge. Others think we simply overwhelmed them by sheer numbers. In a world of scarcity, even small advantages become existential. Still, evidence suggests our relationship was more than just conquest. We interbred with them not just once, but many times across regions. We merged genes, passed on immunities, and left their mark on our lineage. And there's something haunting about that. They didn't vanish, they became part of us. Every time you breathe, dream, or bleed, a Neanderthal whispers in your genome. But for them, the cultural flame dimmed, their language, their songs, their memories gone without a written word. They lived in a world where memory died with the last elder. We can only reconstruct fragments, burials with flowers, pigments on cave walls. Signs that they cared, created, and maybe even grieved. Were they spiritual? Did they have myths? We'll never fully know. What we do know is they were skilled. They crafted Levallois tools, complex flake-based weapons of stone. They hunted in coordinated groups, likely used traps and ambush strategies. They didn't just survive, they mastered the Ice Age world. But despite that mastery, their numbers were always small, tens of thousands maybe. And when sapiens arrived, that fragile equilibrium tipped. It wasn't a war, there's no mass battlefield, no clear genocide. It was something slower, quieter, a merging, a fading, an absorption. They didn't die out in a bang, but a whisper. By 37,000 years ago, the last known Neanderthal sites were abandoned. Their fire pits turned to ash, their bones to dust, and yet, in those same soils, modern human artifacts multiply. We inherited more than genes. We inherited a mystery, a reminder of how precarious life is. Their fall could have been our fall, and maybe one day it still will be. Today, with ancient DNA and climate simulations, we get closer to truth. Each excavation adds a thread to the tapestry of their story, and each discovery brings them closer, more human, more real. They weren't the other, they were us, in an earlier form, strangers at first glance but cousins under the skin, and in many ways their disappearance is the story of survival's brutal cost. Before we continue the search for where they went, we must understand who they were, what they built, how they lived. To lose them fully is to lose part of ourselves, so in the next chapter we'll travel further back into Neanderthal daily life. Their shelters, their families, their art, and their resilience. Because to find out where they went, we first need to know how they lived. To understand where Neanderthals went, we need to understand how they lived. Not as shadows in our past, but as thinking, feeling beings in their own right. Because before their end, there was an extraordinary beginning. Neanderthals weren't wanderers, they were home builders. They constructed shelters from wood, bones and hides near rivers and caves. They knew their terrain, built windbreaks, and tamed the cold with fire. Fire was central to their lives. It cooked their food, warmed their children, lit their darkness. Their hearths are still visible in cave layers, blackened with soot and time. They were hunters, but not just wild chargers with clubs. They crafted sophisticated weapons, thrusting spears shaped with precision. Some researchers believe they used stone-tipped javelins and wooden throwing spears. These weapons weren't simple. They required planning, cooperation, and strength. Neanderthals hunted megafauna mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer. They coordinated in groups, herded prey into traps, struck with deadly force. But they weren't only meat-eaters. Recent residue studies show they cooked and ate plants, seeds, and mushrooms. Some even consumed medicinal herbs, possibly to treat pain or infection. They knew their world intimately. Each plant, each trail, each seasonal pattern, these weren't mysteries. They lived by the rhythm of the earth, adapted to shifting climates and prey. And they weren't constantly on the move. They often returned to the same sites over generations. Their lives followed routes marked by memory, survival, and tradition. Archaeologists find organized living spaces areas for cooking, sleeping, crafting. This shows foresight, structure, and a social logic to their dwellings. Their caves weren't chaos, they were homes with purpose. Their tools were highly specialized. Using the Levallois technique, they pre-shaped cores to produce sharp flakes. This wasn't random, it was a strategic, efficient way of toolmaking. They carried toolkits, blades, scrapers, awls. Some tools show signs of hafting, wooden handles bound with sinew or resin. They fixed, reused, and adapted tools, practical engineering at its finest. And they weren't just practical, they were artists. Cave paintings in Spain, dated over 64,000 years ago, predate Homo sapiens. That means Neanderthals may have invented symbolic art before we did. Those paintings include hand stencils, ladder shapes, and red ochre dots. Simple, yes, but intentional, layered, and deliberate. This was not random decoration, it was communication. They also used pigments on their bodies or tools. Ochre, charcoal, even manganese dioxide, all sourced and applied. Some bones show signs of intentional etching or carving, perhaps ritualistic. In some Neanderthal sites, shells were collected and perforated. Were they worn as necklaces, used in ceremonies, tokens of status? Whatever the purpose, they reveal a mind that valued meaning beyond utility. Burial practices suggest something deeper. Some Neanderthal remains appear deliberately placed in graves. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, one body was found surrounded by pollen, maybe flowers. Did they mourn their dead? Did they understand loss? While we can't ask them, the care of their burials hints at reverence. Death for Neanderthals wasn't just an end, it may have carried ritual. And then there's the social structure, close-knit, complex, and compassionate. Some skeletons show evidence of healed injuries or disabilities. That means others cared for them, fed them, kept them alive. One old man was toothless, unable to chew. Yet he lived years beyond his injury. Someone had to prepare his food. This wasn't just survival, it was community, empathy, and shared life. Neanderthal children played, learned, and grew within these tight units. Fossil footprints show little ones trailing behind adults, stepping in their tracks. They were loved, protected, and taught by watching and doing. Communication was essential. Their brain structures suggest they had speech capabilities, perhaps even language. Not grunts, but vocal tones, gestures, and shared meanings. The hyoid bone in their throat, nearly identical to ours, supports this theory. They could likely control breath, vocalize, and maybe even sing. Language may have been a shared inheritance, not our invention alone. Neanderthal life wasn't easy, but it was rich. Their injuries speak of violence, yes, but also of healing and endurance. They lived on the edge of extinction, but they lived fully. They knew fear, predators, famine, sickness, but also kinship and knowledge. Their children learned to strike flint, track game, read the sky. And in this transfer of wisdom, culture was born. Culture isn't just art or burial. It's how we pass on memory, share experience, and build identity. And the Neanderthals had it, woven into every season and story. So why were they? By 45,000 years ago, the world was changing fast. Homo sapiens were spreading across Europe and Asia like a tidal wave. And in their path, the Neanderthal world began to fracture. Neanderthal populations were already small, scattered, and isolated. Some groups may have numbered fewer than 20 individuals. When times got tough, there were fewer hands to help, fewer voices to remember. The climate was shifting again. Rapid temperature swings tore through Europe, changing habitats overnight. Woodlands vanished, rivers froze, prey migrated or died out entirely. In a stable world, Neanderthals thrived. But in a volatile one, their close-knit groups may have been their weakness. Isolation meant innovation spread slowly and survival grew harder. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens moved quickly and shared knowledge. They adapted fast, formed larger networks, and exchanged tools and ideas. In a fight against time and cold, connection was power. And contact between our species wasn't rare, it was inevitable. DNA tells the story of repeated interbreeding across multiple regions. They didn't just meet us, they joined us at least sometimes. But interbreeding alone couldn't save the Neanderthals. Instead, it may have diluted their gene pool over generations. Their distinct identity blurred, even as traces of them lived on. One theory suggests we brought more than fire and tools. We may have brought disease, viruses, and bacteria they hadn't encountered. What was mild for us could have been fatal for them. Imagine a flu, a respiratory virus, even a parasite. In small, genetically similar groups, contagion would sweep like wildfire. It's not war, but it's still a killer. And yet tools fell silent. Some of the last known Neanderthal refugees were coastal. Gibraltar, southern Spain, parts of the Middle East, mild climates, rich in resources. They clung on, adapting as long as they could. At Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, evidence shows they were still active 40,000 years ago. They hunted birds, gathered shellfish, made fires business as usual. But eventually, even these sanctuaries couldn't hold back extinction. The final flicker may have been regional, not global. Some groups likely survived longer than others, unknown and unrecorded. By 37,000 years ago, the archaeological trail ends. But why? Why did the last groups fail to rebound? Why didn't Neanderthals recover, repopulate, reclaim lost ground? The answer may lie in something deeper: biology, behavior, and sheer chance. Modern humans reproduced faster and more prolifically. We may have had longer childhoods, but more surviving offspring. More babies meant more future, especially in hard times. And we built broader communities. Through trade, communication, and alliances, we weren't just surviving, we were networking. When one group fell, others filled the gap. Neanderthals lacked that buffer. If one group vanished, their stories, tools, and knowledge vanished too. No trade routes, no shared memory, just silence. Some suggest a tipping point was reached. Below a certain population, recovery becomes mathematically impossible. Too few mates, too much inbreeding, too little genetic diversity. Inbreeding weakens immunity, increases disease, and limits adaptation. A shrinking population becomes a doomed one, no matter how tough. Neanderthals may have simply passed that point of no return. Yet their disappearance wasn't the end of their story. Their genes live on in all of us out